Hi, I am your host, Brent Feldman, and we are back with another episode of Mix and Matchbox. Today, I am here with Jon Morris. He is the founder of Engine BI and Fiscal Advocate, and we're here to chat through some questions. So, hi, Jon. How are you doing?
Good, Brent. How you doing?
Doing really well. Thanks for being on the podcast. Looking forward to jumping in here.
I'm looking forward to it as well.
Awesome. Well, I saw, I guess the main thing is that you started Rise, formerly the Internet Marketing Institute, in 2004 from your, win of the New Venture Challenge at the University of Chicago.
Yep.
What do you think it was that the judges noticed that, helped get that win for you?
So my idea was not that amazing. It was originally to teach digital marketing to small business owners. So it wasn't like a groundbreaking idea. However, what we did really well in that competition was we worked on the business while everyone else worked on the business plan. And I really believe it was one slide that put us over the edge, which was in a 2-week period, we created a 2-day curriculum. We sold it out. We got rave reviews. We created a website. We actually had revenue. And so I think it was the momentum that we were able to show, that there was demand for this and that we could execute on it is why I think we ended up doing so well.
That's very cool. You actually had traction to where, a lot of people might come with a great idea, but they don't have that same sort of momentum to prove.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's neat. So I guess your first year in business was a revenue of a whopping $12,000.
Yeah.
But still, yeah, absolutely. But hey, anything you earn on your own, for yourself and your own organization feels great. I know that feeling. So how, were you feeling at that point in time? And, was your, sort of vision always to scale to the point you did, or did you know that at that point?
Yeah. So when I actually interviewed my very first employee, he asked me what my goals were. Now, just so you know, I was in my 1,300 square foot condo interviewing him. And I said, my goal is to create the world's largest independent digital agency. So I had a long-term view and high ambition at that point. My biggest fear was to be a business of the living dead, which is that you make just enough money to never make any money. And so I had very specific sales goals of, every year I held myself accountable. So like when I did the 12,000, I was in school. I wasn't planning on making money. So technically it was $12,000 more than I was planning on making. The next year I did 70,000. The year after that, I did 350,000. And so as long as I kept on seeing momentum, I felt good. If the momentum stopped, that's when I had concerns. And so, no, I had a long-term view. I used to run marathons. And if you ever do a marathon training, it's 18-week training program. And your very first long run is 6 miles. And I always tell people, if you can run 6 miles, you can run a marathon. But the next week you run 7, and then the long run goes down to 5, and then it goes up to 9, and then up to 10, and then down to 7. And I did that same approach, but rather than miles, I thought of it as dollars, and rather than weeks, I thought of it as years. And so I had a 20-year time horizon, and as long as every year I was, growing, then I felt like I was moving in the right direction.
That's awesome. But the vision started from the very beginning, and it was a long-term plan for sure.
Yep.
So what would you say are, some of the critical things that you put in place in order to make sure that your growth didn't stop? And where do you think that other agencies sort of falter along the way?
Yeah. So having a really solid understanding of the financials and the numbers are going to allow you to make really important decisions. So there are 2 numbers that I believe are really important for agency owners to know. The first one is your gross margin. And I'm just going to give a quick explanation of what gross margin is. So if you take your net revenue, which is all of your revenue after you have passed through. So like if you're a $10 million company and you have $8 million in media, that $8 million doesn't count. You're a $2 million company. So I want your budget to do the client work to be 50 to 40%, 40 to 50%, or your gross profit to be 50 to 60%. So let me explain how you calculate that. Anything that relates to doing client work, so payroll, freelancers, tools, travel and entertainment, client gifts, that all goes into your cost of service. And if you have 2 million in revenue and it takes you $1.3 million in cost of service, then you only have $700,000. I want you to have 50 to 60% gross profit, which means that you would only have, let's just say $900 to $1 million in cost of service. So the reason why that is important is because the higher your gross profit is, the more you have to invest in your business and the more you can put into your pocket at the end of the day. Couple just things to note. If you have a gross profit or gross margin between 50 and 60%, you can be really profitable and invest in your business. If it's between 40 and 50%, you're going to have to choose between investing in your business or being profitable. And if you're below 40%, you're most likely going to lose money. So we had at Rise, in my opinion, a gross margin advantage because we focused a lot on it.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is I want you to spend as much as possible as a percent of revenue on sales and marketing. And so understanding, first of all, the average is 8% of revenue is spent on sales and marketing. So if you're spending 4% of revenue on sales and marketing, you're at a competitive disadvantage. And so I want you to figure out, how do you spend 12%? How do you spend 13%? How do you spend more? And so by doing that over time, relative to companies the exact same size of you, your brand should be greater. You should have a greater impact, assuming you spend that money intelligently. Cool. So I would say the third thing, by the way, is I was very focused on differentiation and what makes you unique and great, and that you have to invest in making that happen. So those would kind of be the key drivers that I think led to year-over-year success.
That's awesome. That walks right into the next question really, really well, which is like, yeah, you know, I saw that you like to focus on differentiation as a strategy. And I think that sometimes, you know, maybe this gets boiled to, you know, finding a niche or, you know, like niching down. And something tells me that's not the end of the story and there's probably more to it. But, you know, what do you think in your mind is like, you know, the thing that agencies need to do in order to quote unquote differentiate themselves?
So the first thing is it can't be a goal unless you put budget against it. Okay, so if you want to niche down, you still have to assume that other people are niching down in the same vertical that you are. So let's just say you wanted to go after, I don't know, law firms. Well, I just met with 49 other companies that specialize in law firms. Why are you better than them? So I always talk about the 2-question test. The first question is, what makes you unique or different? Generally, I get the same answer. We care more, our creative is better, you get to talk to more senior people, we're data driven, we only focus on one specific niche, you know, whatever the case is. And so I always say that's awesome. Can you answer the second question? The second question is, I just met with 49 other agencies that have the exact same differentiator that, as you mentioned, what makes you, you know, care more than the other 49 people? And if you can't answer the second question, you don't have a differentiator. The challenge with differentiation is it's a journey. So once you make a commitment to what your differentiator is going to be, you have to budget and you have to sacrifice profits today to make that differentiator real. And I'll just give you an example. At Rise, our vision was to be the leaders in leveraging data to help brands make smarter marketing decisions. There's a very long-winded way of saying we're data-driven. Mm-hmm. And so then 49 other agencies just said that they're data-driven. How are you more data-driven than them? So my answer is that data is a broad term, that there's media data, customer data, consumer data, pricing data, inventory data, a whole bunch of different types of data. We focused very specifically on media data. And what we could do is identify waste faster than anybody else in your media spend and redeploy it to scalable, positive ROI areas. Where if you take someone like Epsilon, their differentiator was really customer data.
Mhm.
So that would be an example. And by the way, we spent 8 figures, if not more, no, still probably in the 8-figure range, on an analytics platform that allows you to do this. And so that's the example of what I want people to be thinking about in terms of what makes you great and what makes you unique. I'll just give you one more example.
Cool.
With my current company, I was in a sales pitch about 8 months ago. And I was in the pitch, and the person's telling me that they're pretty sophisticated, that they look at 315 KPIs every single day. And in my opinion, if you're looking at 315 KPIs, you're really looking at nothing. And so what I'm trying to help people do is analyze the least amount of numbers possible. And I think there's only 3 numbers that matter. How much cash you have relative to monthly overhead, your profit margin, and your year-over-year revenue growth. And we created something called a CPR score. CPR score is an acronym for cash, profit, and revenue. It's also a play on health. But just like you as an individual have a credit score, now marketing agencies have a kind of a credit score, a health score as it relates to CPR score. So we created this score, and I believe that our differentiator is that we can help marketing agencies make better decisions to improve that number relative to anybody else.
Awesome.
And every single thing we do is focused on just how do we help people increase their CPR score. Now, I can tell you that I have a list a mile long of things that will make it better. So a year from now, our product will be better than it is today. But today it's a really good product that is already helping people increase their CPR score. So that's another example.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate what you said about, the differentiator aspect of like essentially not having it only be messaging. Obviously, it was good to be accurate about, what you were doing for, your potential clients or your clients that you're actually working for, but you were making, to what you mentioned, an 8-figure investment in it. It was, here's what we're going to do to actually be like, serving that sort of goal that we had, which is really great. You were putting the investment behind, what makes you different. And in general, it just sounds like too, as you mentioned, the guy who is like looking at so many different data points, there is such a thing as too much data. And and looking at, and trying to be concerned about too many things. And that's great that you're able to help people distill that as well.
Very cool.
Cool. So I guess, the next thing is how important, and this is where you touched on a little, in the investment and marketing sales, but how important is sales versus financial operations? And it's not like pick your favorite child, but, it's like when it comes to scaling, you could make wonderful financial decisions and not have enough sales to make things happen, and vice versa. So, in your mind, what is the balance, or is there a balance, quote unquote?
So a couple of things. I'm going to talk a little bit about financial operations. There are 4 departments in your finance department, or 4 divisions of a finance department. The first is tax. I consider tax really important. I don't think anyone should go to jail for not paying taxes. And it's something that just has to be done. The second one is capital markets. So this is either securing lines of credit or raising money. That one, it really depends. Are you losing money? Do you need a line of credit? Do you need cash to make investments for the future? But most likely sales for a professional service or a marketing agency is going to be more important than capital markets. If you're running your business well, you should be profitable every month. Okay. The third one is what I call as accounting. And there are 2 different aspects of this. There's what I call conducting transactions, and then the other one is called recording transactions. Under conducting transactions, it is invoicing, AR, AP, and payroll. I don't know if they're more important than sales, but like if you're not getting your invoices out on time or you're not collecting your cash, those are important things. Recording transactions gets into analytics. So not only do you need, like when I call recording transactions, it's basically your month-end close, closing the books on a regular basis. There's 3 things you want to do for that. So the first one is you want a fast close. Most of your insights to your business come from closing the books. And so if you close the books within 4 business days, you're going to have more insights at a faster rate than if it takes you 30 days. Some people don't even close it on a monthly basis. The second one is accuracy. You know, if you are putting transactions in the wrong spot or it's not accurate and complete, you're going to have a hard time with your insights. And then the third one is that it's categorized properly so that you can actually gain insight. So I'll give you an example. I talked to you about gross margin earlier. 95% of the time when I look at someone's financial statements, they haven't organized it in a way where you can even know what your gross margin is. So it requires you to do math in your head or a whole bunch of extra work. And then the last group is called financial planning and analysis. And most smaller agencies don't have a FP&A or a financial planning and analysis group, but this is where you get into budgeting, forecasting, and monthly insights. And it is your greatest expense management tool. And I'm not saying it's less important or more important than sales, but you know, sales is oftentimes difficult if you don't have a budget and like you plan for like, I'm going to be going to these events and I'm going to be doing these different things. And so I think it makes your sales more impactful. Mm-hmm. And so I think you get to different stages where that becomes more important. Like when you get to a certain scale, if you're not investing in this, you're going to have a hard time scaling and growing in the next area. So I think it's a wishy-washy answer on my part, to be honest.
Fair.
You know, sales is a massive part of the organization. And especially the one thing I promise people is you will lose every single client you have at some point in time. Might be 50 years, might be 30 years, might be 10 years, might be next year. But CMOs change, CEOs change, companies get bought. You should plan on losing your customers. Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to lose your customers, then you need to bring in new customers. And so I see them going hand in hand where good financial operations is going to help you have enough money to invest in sales to grow.
Cool. That's perfect. I feel like that was a really good way of, you know, sort of tying that in because like, and it's so funny. I've had so many different conversations with like, you know, people that have been in the sales side and obviously vie for like, you know, making that investment, people that have had successful exits and, you know, and vie for obviously the sales, but also the people that have had successful exits also just vouch for saying, hey, you know, make sure your books are good, you know, and if you think they're good, they're not good enough. And really, you know, making sure you understand that finance side of things, because it's, you know, it helps all around. So they do. It sounds like they go hand in hand. If you don't understand the finance, you can't support the sales enough. And yeah, it's a balance. Well, cool. As you continue to grow your agency and, you know, for anybody that is growing an agency, benchmarks, you know, are definitely important. And as mentioned, you know, you mentioned you were looking for that kind of constant momentum, but, you know, so is forecasting, but that can definitely be hard, you know, in terms of like, you know, looking out for what's down the road, what are we going to kind of come into? But people, I think, have a tendency to base their own potential for success based on the success of others. Like, hey, I saw this guy do it, so why don't we just, you know, mirror that? Is that a fair way to set goals, or is that just completely misguided?
Look, I think there are benchmarks that are really important to know. You know, like I mentioned that your gross margin should be 50%. I mentioned that, you know, the average spent on sales and marketing is 8%. The average amount spent on the finance department is 5%. The average spent on the HR department is 4.5%. I think knowing those numbers are really important so that you know if you are overspending or underspending in a specific area, you can ask why. Okay. Now, in terms of mirroring what other people are doing, it all depends on the moment in time and if that strategy still works. By all means, Like, if you can do something that is going to lead to success because someone else did it, then yes, let's replicate it. But if you're not getting the same results, what worked 10 years ago might not work today. And so you have to understand, why did it work for them and what made it unique. If I just take, when I entered, when I started Rise, there was a massive amount of media shifting over from traditional media to digital media. I don't know if it's still, moving over at the same rate as it was. So now the growth rate is probably not, as wide as it was a few years ago. So I think I was a benefit of timing. And so it's like, I want people to understand and realize that, you're not going to get someone who's going to decide, hey, I'm going to cut 20% of my linear budget and put it into digital media, because they probably have already done so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely. And I think that's helpful because and it sounds like the things that you're trying to do with your organizations are help give people the building blocks in which to scale an organization, or at least understand their organization better, not saying, hey, pattern my success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. What I'm recommending, let me give you an example. There are 14 rituals that I recommend people follow that will increase their CPR score or increase their cash profit and revenue. One of them is, I recommend a quarterly sales and marketing plan. And there are 5 elements to that plan. So the first one is, what are you doing for your bottom of the funnel? So your named prospects, what are you doing to win those right now? The next one is short-term leads. Do you have enough leads, and what leverage do you have to increase the number of leads you need in this given quarter? The third is next quarter leads. So what are the things that aren't going to be instantaneous, but that you're going to invest in now, so that next quarter you're better off? Next one after that is planting seeds. When you think about someone who's looking to hire an agency, most likely they have a short list. And just imagine a year from now that they're thinking about, who should I go use? They're going to most likely ask a few people, or they're going to have recall. Are you going to be in that short list? And then the last one is upsell and cross-sell. What are you doing to upsell and cross-sell your existing customers? And so if you have those things in place every 90 days, you should be in a position to continually grow your business on a regular basis. So that's like an example of a ritual that you need a budget for and that you need to implement that should help your business.
That's awesome. Well, throughout this whole conversation, you've touched on a lot of sort of principles of finance, and I know also that's kind of your background, or what you went to school for. That seemed to trickle into obviously what you did. By the way, does it take a degree in finance to implement some of the things that you kind of instruct business owners on, or is it much simpler than maybe it's made out to be?
I don't know if I'd say it's much simpler, but my goal is to make it simpler. If you take the CPR score, I have a persona in mind of a creative person who owns an agency and hates math. And I think about, how do I make this so that it is not intimidating for that person? So it's like, if you log in and you see massive amounts of numbers, I feel like I failed, because there's only certain types of people who can handle that. But if you see a CPR score and you know that a 60 is good and a 10 is bad, you don't necessarily know what to do next. That's like the next question is, okay, well, I got a 10. Well, then it's, is it cash, is it profit, or is it revenue? So I've distilled it down to 4 numbers, your overall CPR score, and then is it cash, profit, or revenue that you need to focus on? Now, let's just say it's revenue. There's only 3 numbers that matter in revenue: new business, upsells, and renewals. And let's just say the new business is the problem. Well, there's only 4 numbers that matter in that, which is number of at-bats, your win rate, your average order value, and the velocity to win deals.
Mhm.
And so in each one of these, the goal is to distill it to the least amount of numbers possible so that people who are scared of math can make decisions that are effective without having to have a PhD in, finance.
Yeah, I think you just called out 95% of agency owners, like,
Yeah.
creative people that basically are scared of math.
Well, if you think about it, most people did not start their agency because they're like, I'm really solid at financial management, and I'm really good at creative, and I think I can do a really good job for my clients.
Hmm.
And so, knowing that that's who you're talking to, how do you help them in a way that is not scary and simple?
That's great. That's awesome. And that's seriously, it's very helpful for the industry because I think is the barrier, to entry, especially in like, agencies I don't want to say like lower and lower because even when, I started or you started, like there's not much sometimes you have to do to say, hey, we're a digital agency,
Yeah.
that's where I think you'll encounter more and more people who have maybe an opportunity and an understanding, and they might be able to get themselves halfway there, but really need that component of financial analysis and understanding of really how to run a business and run it effectively in order to grow, scale, and get to that point of like, that they really want to. Yeah. So I think there are definitely, common tropes about certain ceilings in the agency world. And I'm definitely looking forward to your opinion on this because, and theoretically based on, your total, gross revenue by the time you exited, was over that. It was far exceeding that, and that's what's really interesting. But, there's constantly the 1 million, but then you beat that and you're like, oh, well, then there's this like 3 million ceiling. And you're like, oh, once I get there, then it's that 5 million. It's so hard to get past it. But are these all a figment of people's imagination, or are there real things that occur that help keep these thresholds in place?
So there are 4 different types of CEOs. Okay, there is the startup CEO, the growth CEO, the mature CEO, and the mega CEO. And the way you run your business for each one of them is different. I'll give you an example. In the startup CEO, they generally know everybody. They tend to make all the decisions themselves. And the tools, the infrastructure, and the processes are all around supporting that CEO. When you then go to the growth CEO, you start building a leadership team. And all of a sudden, the tools that you have and the decision making that you have is different. And I'll give you an example. It generally happens right around 20 to 25 employees. I had an account manager who was reporting into me, and we were 17 employees, and there was a problem with a person on his team. And he came to me and he's like, Jon, I want to go talk about so-and-so. I was like, well, I got good news for you. I fired them today. And his response to me was, I will never have the trust and the respect of my team if you make every decision for me. And I knew right then and there that I had to switch from a startup CEO to a growth CEO. Now, I didn't know that those were the labels of it, but that was the change in how I started managing the business. Mm-hmm. When you get to 100 employees, all of a sudden the infrastructure needs to be changed again, where your leaders need the tools to operate and run their business. And so there's a lot of things that just have natural breaks in your system. The other part is, when I left Rise, I really had made a full transition from an operating CEO to a strategic CEO. I had leaders in every single place, and my job was to direct them and to steer the ship, but it was their job to implement everything. And so there's definitely, as you get to different milestones, ways that you have to manage differently, and you also need different tools that go along with it.
Cool. That's super helpful. And that definitely makes sense in regards to like those different thresholds and barriers and basically how
Yeah.
you operate your, like as a leader, in general. So that's super helpful. As you've, run an agency that was, yes, small and also at one point gigantic.
Yeah.
Are there problems that are a common thread that you're like, oh, I dealt with this, here and I dealt with this here, and it was the same thing, or do you kind of outgrow those challenges? Obviously, you grow as a person and as you mentioned as the CEO, but are there things that do remain the same?
Look, at the end of the day, our job is to keep our clients and to win new clients, right? And it doesn't really matter what size you are. Are you keeping your clients and are you winning new clients?
Mm-hmm.
And if you just boil it down to that, sometimes when you are bigger, the clients you lose are bigger clients. So it actually hurts more. So I would say that for the most part, the fundamentals really don't change that much. What changes is what your role is in all of that. But the agency world is a high revenue churn world. Typically, a good agency is going to lose 15 to 20% of their revenue on a yearly basis. And so if you're losing that much revenue, you have to have a really good sales and marketing machine that's bringing in new business. And as the markets change, the competitors change, new service offerings come out, like you always have to make sure you're staying relevant. So I think that a lot of fundamental things stick no matter what stage you're in.
That's great. Well, this is it for, my questions. This is one last one, but it's, this is a big one too, because I've heard this a lot, from business owners where, they're all they're trying to do, they're trying to pull themselves out of the business, and it's been said in multiple ways. I want to work, not in the business, but on the business. I want to, stop doing all the day to day. Or basically place key roles to get there. And so is it strategy, perseverance, key hires, or something else once you establish that financial strategy that helps business owners sort of like pull themselves out of the minutia?
So a couple things. One, there are, regardless of the size of your agency, there are 4 major leadership roles that you want to fill. So a head of sales and marketing, a head of client service that's responsible for all the client work, a head of back office, so operations and finance. When I say operations, HR, legal, corporate, IT, and general administration, and research and development. And so the more you can get leaders in one of those 4 positions in place, the more you can remove yourself from that element of that business. So just when you think about how you start thinking of the strategic direction, if you're running all the client work and you have to be the CEO, that's really hard. And so that's one element. The second one is, as I mentioned before, having very specific rituals that you follow. So I'm a big believer in annual planning. That annual plan should have 4 goals: a revenue goal, a profit goal, a cash goal, and an infrastructure goal. The infrastructure goal is, what are the investments you're going to make this year to make your business better for the following year? And then you break that down into quarterly goals. And quarterly goals is a couple things. One, you are resetting your annual goals. So you're going through an entire budgeting process again. But you are also looking at, what are you going to do to focus for the next 90 days on achieving your annual goals? And so the more you have these rituals in place, the more you can actually be thinking about the business in a, not necessarily a knee-jerk reaction way, but a time where you've built the time to actually do it.
Cool. I love the idea of all the systematizing of things, and and as you mentioned, like the rituals, and definitely just like the individual goals. And it's interesting because like I feel like EOS is catching on as like a like definitely like a methodology in order to like start looking at some of those bare bones. but it almost seems like, there's a lot more granular elements, and especially, on the, whether it be the sales or the finance side, that can really help people get a better picture of maybe where their organization is headed, as well as, what is that future potential of the organization in general.
Yep, and I'll just give you an example. So EOS was created like 25 years ago, and they talk about being EOS pure, and they haven't evolved at all.
Mm-hmm.
So the base framework, which is the framework that I teach people, is built off of EOS,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the elements that I think are missing. And I'll just give you an example. I had an EOS implementer, and he actually used to own an agency. He had clients as an agency, and he's like, for the next 6 months, we're going to build out your scorecard. And I was like, well, shouldn't you be able to just give me the scorecard, like given that you owned an agency and you have agencies and clients? And he's like, it doesn't really work that way. And in my opinion, it should work that way. So like in the BASE framework, BASE is an acronym for business planning, alignment, scorecard, and execution. We give you the scorecard. We explain that the CPR score is the most important number and what are the metrics that follow suit underneath that CPR score. And, another good example is, for your annual planning, like as I just mentioned, there's only 4 things that matter. It's revenue, profit, cash, and infrastructure. And so it's designed to help very specifically professional service companies or marketing agencies scale and grow.
That's awesome. Yeah. And by the way, I have always felt that same way about EOS. Like, can't you just give that to me? Like, yeah. That would be nice. So that's wonderful. And I appreciate it. We just walked right into what I think the title of the podcast needs to be, which is like, what's missing from EOS?
I could take you through a whole bunch of different things if you're interested.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you, definitely giving all these, great lessons, this, sort of like overview of, what people need to think about and focus on. Do you want to give out the, sort of websites people should go to find you?
Absolutely. So you can go to enginebi.net, and that's where you'll learn more about our mastermind program and our strategic planning and business intelligence software for marketing agencies. You can go to fiscaladvocate.com, which is a fractional CFO service specifically for marketing agencies. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of content on how to scale and grow your agency. And you can always email me at jon@enginebi.net.
That's awesome. Well, Jon, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Brent, I love this conversation. It was great.
Awesome. Well, I am your host, Brent Feldman. This has been another episode of Mix and Matchbox. We will be back soon with more content. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.